we begin at the threshold, where the Dwemer seem to have left the world without leaving the world entirely. Their cities remain under mountains and ice, full of brass pipes, cut stone, sealed doors, and machines that continue to wait in the dark. Yet, the people who made those places are gone, not reduced to simple ruins by time, not scattered into visible descendants, not remembered through an ordinary decline. They vanished so completely that the absence itself became one of the great mysteries of Tamriel. In Skyrim, Morrowind, and the older histories, the same quiet question returns again and again. What happened to the deep elves at the moment of Red Mountain? The answer is difficult because the Dwemer were never an easy people to understand. They were brilliant, skeptical, proud, and deeply interested in the laws underneath the surface of reality. They built as if the world could be measured. They studied as if gods were not masters, but problems. Tonight we follow the trail slowly through the cities they left behind, the tools they made, the war that gathered around Red Mountain, and the strange possibilities that remain after every simple explanation has fallen away. Keep your attention on the doorway for a moment. The mystery works best when it is allowed to stay quiet. We are not rushing toward an answer, because the Dwemer themselves left us no simple confession. We are following impressions, artifacts, and old histories, one careful step at a time. The Dwemer are often called dwarves in later speech, but that name hides more than it explains. They were an elven people, remembered as deep elves, and their depth was not only physical. They lived beneath the surface, but they also searched beneath appearances. Where many cultures bowed to spirits, ancestors, and divine signs, the Dwemer preferred craft, logic, experiment, and a kind of fierce independence. Their halls were not humble shelters. They were declarations made in stone and metal, long avenues, angular chambers, pressure doors, pipes, gears, lifts, and observatories all suggest a civilization that trusted its own hands. Even the quietest ruin feels organized around a mind that wanted to know how everything worked. That is part of what makes their disappearance so unsettling. A people this controlled should have left a controlled ending. Instead, they left meals unfinished, chambers intact, mechanisms still awake, and questions that refuse to settle. To walk through a Dwemer ruin is to feel the difference between abandonment and interruption. It does not feel as if everyone slowly packed up and moved away. It feels as if a sentence was being spoken, and then the speaker simply ceased to be present. This is why their ruins are so useful for a sleep-friendly telling. They give the mind something solid to hold: brass, stone, stairs, pipes, and shadow. Around those solid things, the question can soften. The Dwemer become not only a lost people, but a mood of disciplined curiosity. The machines are the first witnesses we meet, because they are the witnesses that survived. Centurions, spheres, spiders, locked mechanisms, steam systems, and hidden doors all suggest a culture that built guardians to continue without them. This can make the ruins feel alive even when they are empty. A lever moves. A pump breathes. A gate answers a pattern. The city remembers procedure, even if it no longer remembers its citizens. This mechanical survival matters to the mystery because it shows that the disappearance was not the destruction of Dwemer technology. The cities were not erased. Their power was not simply broken. In many places, the works of the Dwemer endured better than the histories of the people who feared or admired them. That contrast is almost dreamlike. Their machines obey old instructions, but no Dwemer voice arrives to change them. Their chambers still express purpose, but the purpose has gone silent. The more carefully we look at their engineering, the less likely the disappearance feels accidental. It seems tied to some deliberate act, some grand attempt at knowledge or transformation, something powerful enough to touch an entire people at once. In ASMR terms, the machines give the episode its rhythm. A low imagined hum, a slow turning gear, a valve cooling in the dark. We do not need loud danger here. The tension is gentle. A working city with no citizens left to come home. To understand the disappearance, we have to spend a little time with the Dwemer way of thinking. The surviving picture is incomplete, but the shape is clear enough to feel. They were not simply inventors. They were metaphysical engineers. They treated reality itself as something with hidden structure, hidden tones, hidden laws. Their interest in tonal architecture points toward a belief that sound, pattern, and precise manipulation could change the world at a very deep level. In that sense, a Dwemer machine was never only a machine. It could be an argument. It could be a question asked of creation. This attitude put them at odds with many other peoples of Tamriel. especially those who approached the divine with reverence. The Dwemer seem to have approached the divine with challenge. If gods existed, then perhaps gods could be studied. If reality was shaped by myth, perhaps myth had machinery beneath it. This does not make the Dwemer villains. It makes them dangerous in a subtler way. They were willing to test boundaries that most cultures treated as sacred. And when a whole civilization gathers around that willingness, one experiment can become large enough to end an age. That is also why the Dwemer remain fascinating instead of merely strange. They are close enough to understand as makers and scholars, but distant enough that their motives never settle completely. The more we describe them, the more the silence around them becomes part of the description. The story narrows around Red Mountain, in the land that would become central to so much Dwemer memory and conflict. Here the political and the mythic become difficult to separate. The Dwemer of Resdain, led in memory by figures such as Dumek, lived beside the Chimer, whose own leaders and saints would become bound to the same mountain. At first, there were alliances and uneasy arrangements, but beneath them lay deep differences in belief. The Dwemer project associated with Kagrenac, the Heart of Lorkhan, and the making of Numidium became the point where those differences could no longer remain quiet. Later accounts disagree, and many are shaped by religion, guilt, pride, or mystery. Still, the basic pressure is clear. Something immense was being attempted under Red Mountain. The Dwemer had access to a power tied to the creation of the world itself, or at least to one of the oldest stories about that creation. Around that power gathered fear, ambition, betrayal, and war. The disappearance was not an isolated vanishing in some sealed laboratory. It came at the center of a crisis where armies, gods, engineers, and myth all pressed against the same hidden chamber. So when we approach Red Mountain, we approach it with care. This is not just a battlefield marker on a map. It is the place where political history, religious memory, and metaphysical experiment seem to fold over each other, leaving later ages to sort through the ash. Numidium stands at the heart of the unease. It is remembered as a giant brass construct, but that phrase is too small for what it represents. To the Dwemer, it may have been the final expression of their deepest ambition, not merely a weapon, not merely a machine, but a new answer to divinity, a constructed God. a proof that the laws of existence could be forced into a different shape. Kagrenac's tools, the Heart of Lorkhan, and the tonal knowledge of the Dwemer all gather around this idea. The details are famously uncertain, and that uncertainty is part of why the story remains so powerful. Did the Dwemer hope to transcend mortality? Did they seek to reject the gods by building their own divine principle? Did they intend to become something greater, or to make something greater that would serve their people? In a calmer telling, we do not need to pretend that one answer is proven. What matters is that the project was vast enough to involve the whole fate of the Dwemer. When the moment came, whatever was struck, tuned, activated, or misjudged did not merely affect a room. It reached a civilization. For a quiet episode, Numidium should feel less like spectacle and more like weight. Imagine the idea of it before the movement of it. A vast brass possibility waiting below the mountain, carrying every hope and every danger the Dwemer had learned to build. Then comes the instant that every version circles around. During the Battle of Red Mountain, as conflict reached the chamber of the heart, Kagrenac used his tools. After that, the Dwemer were gone. Some stories imply that they were destroyed. Others suggest they were transformed, removed from the mortal plane, absorbed into Numidium, or scattered into a state no ordinary witness could understand. The rare survival of Yagrum Bagarn, absent from Tamriel at the moment of the event, makes the mystery sharper rather than simpler. If all Dwemer everywhere vanished, and one survived because he was elsewhere, then the event seems tied to the race as a whole, or to something connecting them beyond normal distance. It is an eerie thought. Imagine every city, every workshop, every council chamber, every engineer, scholar, guard, and child touched by one impossible note. No slow fading, no evacuation, no final procession, just the world after, still holding the shapes of their lives, but not the lives themselves. That is why the ruins feel so restful and so disturbing at once. They are intact enough to invite us in, and empty enough to make us whisper. Let the moment remain almost still. The most frightening part is not noise or destruction, but the clean break between before and after. One breath, the Dwemer are part of the world. In the next, the world is full of their work and empty of them. After After the disappearance, the Dwemer became a civilization of evidence without testimony. Their ruins were claimed by time, by Falmer in some places, by scholars, adventurers, treasure hunters, and frightened local stories. The absence turned every object into a clue. A lexicon might suggest knowledge stored in forms later people barely understand. A sealed mechanism might imply ritual, security, or ordinary maintenance. A brass guardian might preserve an order from a master who has not existed for thousands of years. The danger for any lore seeker is to turn every clue into certainty. The Dwemer invite that temptation because their work looks precise. It feels as if precision should produce a precise answer. But the surviving evidence does not give us that gift. It gives us patterns. It gives us moods. It gives us a sense of scale. The people were real. Their craft was real. Their disappearance was real inside the history of the Elder Scrolls. But the final meaning remains partly hidden behind damaged records, contradictory accounts, and the simple fact that the Dwemer themselves are not here to correct anyone. That humility is useful for the whole episode. We can name the famous pieces, but we do not force them into certainty. Elder Scrolls lore often leaves room for myth to behave like mist. And the Dwemer disappearance is one of the places where that mist is most beautiful. Blackreach gives the mystery a softer, wider echo. Beneath Skyrim, in the blue glow of mushrooms, waterfalls, stone, and old Dwemer work, the absence feels almost cosmic. The place is not only a ruin, it is a world under the world. Towers rise where no sun reaches. Roads cross enormous caverns. Machines sleep beside living fungi. The scale suggests that the Dwemer did not merely hide underground. They made underground spaces into kingdoms of their own. In Blackreach, the disappearance feels less like a single historical fact and more like weather that never ended. Every path leads past things built for a society that no longer arrives. Every light falls on surfaces shaped by hands that are gone. And because Blackreach is beautiful, the sadness is gentle rather than harsh. The viewer can rest there. The lore can breathe there. The mystery becomes less about solving a puzzle quickly and more about sitting with what remains when a great people have passed beyond every ordinary map. Sometimes the calmest answer is to admit that the echo is part of the story. Blackreach also gives the viewer a place to rest after the harsher ideas of war and divine machinery. Blue light, slow stone, and distant towers let the mystery widen again. The question becomes less sharp, more spacious, like a cavern ceiling disappearing into dark. So where does the mystery leave us? The most careful answer is that the Dwemer disappeared in connection with Kagrenac's use of the Heart of Lorkhan during the crisis at Red Mountain, and that the exact nature of what happened remains unresolved. That may sound unsatisfying, but in Elder Scrolls lore, unresolved does not mean empty. It means the story still has depth. The Dwemer may have been punished, transformed, absorbed, displaced, or carried into a state that later minds cannot describe. They may have achieved something terrible, or failed at something beautiful, or both at once. Their disappearance warns us about knowledge without humility, but it also preserves a strange respect for courage, discipline, and imagination. They asked questions almost no one else dared to ask. Then, at the deepest point of the question, they vanished. What remains is brass, stone, blue darkness, old machines, and the feeling that reality once rang like a bell under Red Mountain. We cannot hear the full note now. We can only listen to the silence after it and let the ruins keep their secret a little longer. And in that final quiet, the story becomes useful for sleep. There is no need to solve everything before the end. The old halls can remain old. The machines can keep their patient rhythm. The missing people can stay just beyond the edge of knowing.